Our meeting tonight is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science.
Joanne, Florida. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. In last week's roundtable session, the practitioner pointed out the danger of idleness, the danger being that it makes one susceptible to all types of wrong thinking, like ingratitude, indifference, discontent, and criticism, to name just a few. For many years, I've had a habit of making a to-do list every day and then working at finishing each item on that list during the day. Doing this always gave me a sense of direction and productivity. Well, a few weeks ago, I stopped making such a daily list. Because I was stuck at home and all the days seemed to run together, I wrongly thought, what's the use of a to-do list? As a result, I felt my thinking getting fuzzier and less focused. Then I heard last week's roundtable session, and I woke up. I remembered the statement from Science and Health in the lesson last week. Quote, "We sustain truth not by accepting, but by rejecting a lie." End quote. So I rejected the lie of idleness, and this Monday started again to make a daily to-do list, listing 6 things I wanted to accomplish that day. At the end of the day, I realized I had completed them all. The sense of accomplishment made me feel really good, but more importantly was the fact that I had roused myself from a sense of idleness and lethargy, both physically and mentally. I felt a clarity in my thinking again. I'm grateful to the practitioner for this lesson and for every lesson I have learned in Christian Science. Christian Science has given me health and all good in my life and has taught me how to think rightly with God. I'm very grateful for membership in this church and to be here tonight, and thank you for those beautiful readings about joy.
Thank you. Jeremy.
A few weeks ago, I wrote on the forum about how events in my childhood led me to feel that I was ugly, and how the golden text that week really healed me, honestly. I won't get back into it too much since it was spoken of at the round table that Sunday. I just want to say how grateful I am for the true healing this has brought me. I've felt an incredible lightness since then. My practitioner recently showed me a story by John Bunyan called The Pilgrim's Progress, in which the main character has this weight on his back that no one else is aware of, and in the end God frees him of it. I could relate to that because of all the false beliefs I've been healed of so far, this one definitely felt the heaviest. I feel now there is this running scorecard of healings in which I have been shown that as long as I am reflecting God, I am not ugly, not stupid, not useless, not undeserving, not unlovable, not without purpose, and not without place. There is this whole list of limits I have been freed from, so that each day I am getting closer to being just what God made me to be. I am very grateful for Christian Science and my practitioner, as I am 100% certain that I would have never gotten this understanding on my own. It's so wonderful to be a part of this church. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dave from Florida. Go ahead, please.
Hi. I'm grateful for a healing I had years ago when I was in boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois. It was sub-zero weather, and a lot of guys, including me, were really sick. There was no way I could call home for help, but there was a Christian Science chaplain there who was a practitioner. He would come once a week and had a small office assigned to him. Happily, I was able to get permission to go there one night after the day's fun was over. I asked him for help and spent a couple hours there. I remember reading Science and Health and also taking a much-needed nap. When I left, I was feeling 100% better, and by the next day, I was fine. I was very grateful for this healing. I'm grateful for Christian Science to be a member here. Thank you for those readings. And oh, here's an interesting tidbit. I later found out that my practitioner here in Plainfield knew this chaplain. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you for the readings this evening. Tonight I want to express my gratitude for the lessons I have been learning here about how to use Christian Science in my daily life. When I arrived at the church several years ago, I had lost a lot of my physical strength and was not able to be as active as I needed or wanted. After regular Plainfield practitioner support, participating in classes and making God a priority, practicing what I was learning, my strength has been returning. I had a task that required physical endurance over several weeks, church work. I was told by my practitioner to affirm that anything or everything that I did, I should do with love and joy and for God, and that this activity could only bless me. Each week I found myself getting stronger and stronger. I was greatly blessed by this opportunity to prove the power of these truths. I want to express my gratitude to Christ, for Christ Jesus and his teaching, for Mary Baker Eddy and all the sacrifices she lived through so that we could have this science, and for all the people who have gone before us in this little church so that we could have what we have now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Luba, Ohio. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Recently, I came to the realization that since coming to Plainfield, I had not experienced the usual winter cold that would sometimes incapacitate me and linger for weeks. Even a family member recently commented that I did not get sick this winter. I am so grateful for the change that has come about, and I'm very grateful for the work of my dedicated practitioner and for all I am learning here, and I do thank God for all he provides. Thank you so much for tonight's reading, and I am happy to be here.
Thank you. Sharon.
Years ago, I was laid off from my job, and I was concerned about my income since unemployment is less than my paycheck. I called a practitioner from this church for help. She assured me that divine love always has met and always will meet every human need, and that's by Mrs. Eddy. She also gave me an article, Talk on Supply by Edward Kimball, and asked me to work with it. It said, what we need to do is reach out toward unlimited thought. Supply is omnipresent and unlimited. Of course, my needs were met, and I got a better job than I had before. Recently, due to the world economy, I was laid off with many other people, and it was 6 weeks before I received an unemployment payment. During this time, I never worried about paying my bills or not having any income. I was trusting God and had no fear or thought of lack because God is my income. All my bills were paid on time. The lesson was learned, and it is mine forever. I'm so grateful for the help of the practitioner, for Mrs. Eddy giving us this religion, and for God. Thank you for the readings.
Thank you. Shardy.
Good evening, and yes, thank you for those beautiful readings. During these past weeks, I have been giving a lot of thought to Christian Science and how grateful I am to have been introduced to this science that Mrs. Eddy so unselfishly brought to us. She devoted her life to God, and everything she accomplished for mankind is beyond anything that I have ever witnessed. I was raised in a Protestant church, and it wasn't until I was in high school that I had a healing through Christian Science. That was a beautiful beginning. Although I attended a Sunday school regularly in my other church, I did not understand that the healings and teachings of Christ Jesus were meant to be practiced and actually taught and seen, that's demonstrated, in every age, in every nation, to everyone. I thank God every day that I have been given the privilege and opportunity to be here in this community at the Plainfield Independent Church, where true Christian Science is taught and shared with the world. This cause and ministry is so awesome that my prayers and watches reach out daily for all hearts to open to the most wonderful love that God has provided for all of us if we but seek Him. Just as I have been blessed with God's grace, I pray for all mankind to see God as He has given us and supplied us with everything for all through Christian Science. And from Science and Health, page 271, line 21, quote, "When the science of Christianity appears, it will lead you into all truth," end quote. And Mary Baker Eddy goes on to say that the Sermon on the Mount is the essence of this science. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce.
I also want to thank Amanda for those wonderful readings. And when she read from Miscellaneous Writings this, where Mrs. Eddy says, St. Paul wrote, "Rejoice in the Lord always." And then she continues with, "And why not? Since man's possibilities are infinite, bliss is eternal, and the consciousness thereof is here and now." And remind me of a couple of experiences that I've had I'm very grateful for, but show the point that there's never any reason to not be joyful. You know, that's our divine right to feel God's presence and His love and to be joyful about it. One of them was many years ago when I was under a heavy weight of trying to fight a lot of negative things and ended up making a reality of them in my mind instead of dealing with them properly. A teacher in our church told us a very simple statement where she said, "God made man satisfied." And I remember when I heard that, this other thing that I was arguing with just dropped off like a heavy weight just being removed. And I was very happy after that instead of burdened. And then there was another experience which just recently I filled up our dishwasher at home, put the soap in, and closed the door and pushed the button to get it started, and it wouldn't start. No matter what I did, I just couldn't get that thing to go. So then I went online and did some research on this model, and sure enough, I found other things that were confirming how bad this thing was, and it was just a lot of negative news. So then I sat down, and the voice came to me saying, "Okay, so your dishwasher doesn't work." And then you went online to confirm how negative you should feel about this thing. What are you going to do now? And I remembered that statement that teacher gave us years and years ago. God made man satisfied. And if He made man satisfied, that means everything that we have is from God and it works well. And with that in mind, the idea came, well, just go downstairs and turn off the circuit breaker, wait for a while, and then turn it back on, which I did. And wouldn't you know it, the dishwasher fired up and did what it was supposed to do. I'm so thankful for Christian Science and to learn this lesson that there's no reason ever why we shouldn't be joyful no matter what we're going through. God is with us all the way.
Thank you.
Betty, California. Go ahead, please.
Good evening. Thank you for the readings tonight. They were wonderful. I would like to express gratitude for this church and for this service and the readings and the testimonies that are being given tonight. And also for all the healings I've had in Christian Science with the help and teaching of Plainfield Christian Science Church and Plainfield practitioners. One of the things that I'm really grateful for recently is for working with for the current world situation and also in the national situation. And this has been proven to be a blessing in learning how to work and watch and be more focused about doing so and not getting caught off guard or, doing something different and then realizing I wasn't doing what I needed to be doing. And I've been very grateful for practitioner support in this. And as a side note with this and being more focused and so forth, recently I was trying to take care of some roses and I was spraying them for aphids and feeling very frustrated and kind of exasperated that all that work didn't seem to be doing any good and these aphids just seemed to be multiplying instead of going away. And finally I just looked up and I declared that God governs these roses and those aphids can't do any harm. And darned if the roses just bloomed like crazy and look better than they have in years. I'm so grateful for Christian Science as taught in this church and very grateful to be here tonight for this service. Thank you.
Thank you.
Day, Georgia. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Through my practice of Christian Science over the past few years, I've started to realize that I needed to completely change my approach to dealing with difficult or challenging situations with others. In the past, when I've had problems with friends, co-workers, or family members, I would always think about and often dwell on the behaviors that I felt the other person needed to get rid of or to improve in order for us to get along or for harmony to be restored. I'm grateful to have learned through a number of experiences that in order for necessary positive changes to take place, while asking God for wisdom and guidance, I must always take a look at my own behaviors, thoughts, and feelings to be sure that they are truly good and aligned with God. By practicing this way, I'm constantly finding much opportunity for personal growth and improvement. And with the desire to do and to be better, while persistently working at it daily, I'm starting to see beyond the outward picture of myself and others and gaining a more spiritual view. And this is slowly but certainly healing and correcting my relationships and experiences as God is directing. I'm thankful for the opportunity to continue in this practice and to see the invaluable way that it has changed and is still changing my life. Thank you so much, Amanda, for tonight's readings and for all the testimonies given so far. I'm very grateful, and I'm very grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Craig, go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, Amanda, for those very encouraging and inspiring readings. And I also want to give gratitude to for our hymnal, because with most recently I've been ever more diligently watching during my nightly watches, and I found the hymnal has been there's nothing more important to me to get going and started, but then to find one of the hymns to put me in the right state of mind, whether it be Make Haste, O Man, to Do, hymn 183, or Put on the Whole Armor of God, 292, or Onward Christian Soldiers. But once there, I've felt so much inspiration and drive to continue through the night, well, through my hour. And sometimes the hymnals would bring me to tears. They're just that powerful. I thank God for Mary Baker Eddy, who provided this, and for our church that uses it. Thank you.
Thank you. Gary.
I'm grateful to have learned in this church that Christian Science healing requires rooting out error and exposing it and destroying it. And had an experience a while ago that brought this out very clearly to me. It was one weekend I awoke one morning with a runny nose and a sore throat. And my first thought was, well, bummer. But then I thought, no, that this is only trying to keep me from doing the work that I have to do for God, for His church. And I vowed not to let it slow me down or keep me from doing what I needed to do. And I asked God to show me what it was that I needed to know. Well, soon that day, a practitioner from this church brought something to my attention that I had done that was not right. And it shook me at the time to think that I had done something like this that wasn't right. And I went deep inside and asked God to forgive me and to, help me to make right what it was. It cleared the air. I accepted. I took it. I mean, it was a rebuke, and I took it. It cleared the air, and it was healing. And from that point, with my thought changed, the congestion and the soreness began to dissipate. And I was able to do everything that day that I needed to do without difficulty. In fact, with a much clearer thought about it. And the complete healing took place quite quickly. So I'm so grateful for this kind of help and for all that I'm learning by being a member of this church. I'm grateful to Mary Baker Eddy for discovering this science, which is divine and not human, and it heals. I'm so grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Lil, go ahead, please.
Thank you for those wonderful readings. They were so powerful. I'm so grateful for Christian Science to be learning that God is always at our side, guarding and guiding us in everything we do, every moment. Today, I had a proof of God's loving presence. My cell phone suddenly was showing a 5-hour difference in the actual time. I had no idea what happened and what to do. The phone store was closed, and I had no one to help me. I kept getting the thought to call the phone company that perhaps they could help me remotely. I just felt this was God directing me. After a couple of calls, I was connected to someone in customer service who fixed the entire issue completely. This was God's perfect working out. Nothing is impossible. I was just so grateful. God always has the answer, and we need to stay positive and expect only good. And this, my practitioner is helping me with to do. I thank God for His love and Mrs. Eddy for giving us this pure Christian Science, this wonderful way of life. Thank you.
Thank you. This is Carol. When my two boys were in school, they were scheduled to help out on a church function on a Saturday, and both kids got up with the measles. I called a practitioner because I didn't quite know what to do, how to handle that. We were pretty new in Plainfield Christian Science, and the practitioner said, "Bring them along, have them come. They can still help." And I said to her, "But isn't it kind of dangerous? Could they not give it to someone else?" And she said, "Oh, of course not." She said, "There is no contagion in mind. God governs." And my fear of the contagion disappeared. It dropped like an old coat. It was just gone. So we did. I brought them along, and after just a short time, you could see that they were feeling much better. They didn't feel ill, and they were doing very well. And by the end of the day, even the spots were gone. They were totally healed, both kids. I just am so very grateful for the practitioner's help and for that example of how to really lean on God and let Him guide, and that He does have a right answer. I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Florence, Georgia, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Amanda, for the needed readings. They were beautiful. Many years ago, I used to wake up some mornings filled with so much sadness. And those times, that meant that the whole day was going to be gloomy, because from that moment in the morning with that feeling, I didn't know how to shake it off. So there would come a succession of bad memories and fears of the future. Then at times it would be so bad that I would lose any sense of vitality as well. I'm so grateful for Christian Science, because since learning to clear my thought at the end of the day, to keep a good thought before sleeping, and then to wake up to immediately thank God and declare that God is my mind and my life, this lie of sadness gets no chance to tempt anymore. If any sense of gloom tempts, I have learned to quickly replace it with gratitude for God's help in the day ahead. I'm so grateful and happy for Nehemiah and his example in the Bible, where he encourages the people when they were all grieving during the times of building the temple and the walls and all. He says, this is in Nehemiah 8:10, "Go your way, eat the fat and drink the sweet, and send portions unto them for whom nothing is prepared. For this day is holy unto our Lord. Neither be ye sorry, for the joy of the Lord is your strength." I know now that when I look forward to work each day to bless others with God's help, we can all keep our joy, and that gives us our strength. I'm so grateful for learning this. Now I have a testimony from someone, a new member in North Carolina. She says, "Thank you to everyone who shares such wonderful testimonies. I always hear something that lifts my thought and helps me during the week. When I was younger, I often wished that God would show up as a burning bush or speak with a booming voice. But over the years, I've come to understand that God speaks however we can hear at the moment, if we turn with wholehearted willingness to listen. A few years ago, I was in Dallas working. I no longer remember what I was struggling with, but I was praying like crazy day and night. One morning, before I went to work, it came to a head, and I was praying to get some kind of clarity, but nothing came. A bit frustrated and slightly desperate, I headed out on my morning walk still praying. But this old pop song kept going through my head. It wasn't even a song I had recently heard on the radio. I wanted to pray, but all I could hear was this song.
So I said out loud, God, I'm serious. I really need an answer here. And in that moment, I heard back loudly and clearly, I am giving it to you. All of a sudden, I knew the song held the answer. So I found the song on my phone and listened to it all the way through. When it hit this line, I burst into a huge grin. Quote, it's always the same. It's the shame. That's all. That was it. I'd fallen for the same old story of shame and self-loathing again. There wasn't some physical issue, just an old lie that needed unseeing. As I walked, I played the song over and over, almost dancing in my joy at feeling God's care. I turned the lie over to God and then loved it, what love does, wiped it away. Since then, the few times that old shame story tries to attach itself to me, I remember that song and I remember not to fall for that lie. About a month later, I was woken up by my little dog who seemed to be having trouble breathing. This happened from time to time and I began praying. Suddenly out of the blue, another old pop song came into my head, one that I had never really liked. Because I was busy praying, I began to get a little bit irritated. Then suddenly I remembered what had happened a month earlier. So I sat up, flipped on the light, and looked up the lyrics. When I got to this one, I knew it was the answer I needed. Quote, we are sharing the same dream, and our hearts beat as one. My beloved pet and I were sharing the same dream, so it was up to me to wake up and become a clearer transparency for truth and love. I turned the light off, held her close to me, all fear gone, as I felt God's love wash over us. That was the last time that ever happened. What I heard through those songs is what I learned each week listening to these Plainfield testimony meetings. God is all. Therefore, God speaks to us through all aspects of God's creation, testimonies, art, music, nature, the words we study, the blueness of the sky, the still small voice. And believe it or not, one time during a long drive through scary tornado warnings, I actually did get that burning bush I'd hoped for in the form of a gigantic and totally unexplained bright red prism of light, assuring me I was on the right road. Mrs. Eddy says, practice, not profession, understanding, not belief, gain the ear and right hand of omnipotence, and they assuredly call down infinite blessings. I am so grateful for all the ways that Christian Science wakes us up to understand, experience, and express the glorious allness of God. I'm happy to be here tonight.
Thank you. Mary.
Good evening, everyone. I'll read from our church website bulletin board, the First New Jersey. Thank you for the round table last Sunday. There are so many ideas and points to be grateful for. The one post mentioned about being called ugly hit a personal note for me, and the conclusion about being the image and likeness of God, therefore beautiful, is very comforting. The article called There Is No Death shared about the man who passed on and returned to tell his wife about his experience, and for her not to grieve or worry about what other people thought of her, because if they really knew her, they would love her, is a beautiful story. Also, the idea to sit at the feet of Jesus and be more like Mary and less like Martha is a good lesson for me. There is so much more, and I enjoy listening to it from myself and using many of the ideas in my watches. And then Florida. Thank you so much, Faith, Jared, Bruce, and Craig, for that beautiful solo, The Transfiguration. It has always been my favorite, and your singing of it was the most holy. It's so healing that I've listened to it again several times and shared the link with some loved ones up north. Thank you again for sharing your God-given gift. In Pennsylvania, thank you for the calendar email links. This week, the No Discouragement testimony and the audio of Mrs. Eddy's New Commandment from Miscellaneous Writings were especially helpful. And Virginia, thank you so much for Forum Highlights 161, covering Bible lessons, reality and unreality. There is so much inspiration and uplift. It is a treasure to work with. Gems that pass so quickly in the weekly forum are saved and lovingly offered with powerful messages for all. Thank you again. And then this was an email, someone new. He says he's from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I have been studying Christian Science since 1983. I took class instruction in 1885, and I worked as reader, vice president, school teacher, Sunday school, in the Sunday school, and other occupations in the church. After a few years, I walked away. Following my daily readings constantly, 3 years ago I found independent Christian Science and began to follow its lessons, writings, and what most impacted me are Mary Baker Eddy's writings and many other readings for all, and mainly because I feel inside I want to be a member, or in principle to have a conversation with you to know what the requirements are, and I am open to all questions that they think it's convenient to ask me. Thank you very much, and I send you an affectionate greeting. And then this is a testimony from California. Most of my life I had been enslaved to wanting what was not rightfully mine. Most of the time I daydreamed, fantasized, and wished. My norm was being overinvested, frantic, excessive, and paranoid. I've realized that I truly didn't want whatever I pursued because it or they were not the truth my soul ached for. I seeked, cried out, and knocked, and the love that responded and took me into its embrace is beyond description. I have a ways to go, but I am strong and happy in the way of the Christ's life and truth. I'm learning I don't need to hide, avoid, or cower from situations. When tempted to do so in the holy stillness of knowing God, I have mastered such deceptions. I am thankful to the Plainfield teachings and practitioner support in helping restore my spiritual sight. Thank you all. And then this is another new person from California. I am a lifelong Christian Scientist. For the last few months, I have been listening to the Plainfield Christian Science Independent Church Bible Studies, roundtables, Wednesday evening services, studying the weekly watches, and reading the weekly lessons. What an inspired source of instruction and sustenance. I wanted to express my gratitude to the church and those who have so lovingly prepared a table before me each week. I have always prayed to receive inspiration from what I read and pass that on to the Sunday school students I teach. And that inspiration comes sometimes at the last minute when class is in session to completely change the course of the teaching. However, since finding the Plainfield Christian Science Independent Church, I have been learning that I can consciously ask for and expect that inspiration now. Reading an article from Mrs. Evans entitled Choices put me back on track in getting my lesson each morning before the days start, instead of the end of the day, so that my day starts with God and I can easily affirm His presence throughout the day as it unfolds. And then she gives some messages that came to her about the last week's lesson, Everlasting Punishment, that she wanted to share. So we're very grateful to have these new people finding us, and that they write to us, and we're always welcome that they join as members, or join in whatever way they feel inspired to do. Thank you so very much for those readings tonight. We have certainly learned that joy and gratitude are two essential ingredients to any healing, and it is well to be reminded that we keep our joy no matter what. There's always something to be grateful for and to thank God for. I thought it was very beautiful. You read in Miscellany, "Oh, may this hour be prolific, and at this time, and in every heart, may there come this benediction. Thou hast no longer to appeal to human strength, to strive with agony. I am thy deliverer." I had received these readings this afternoon, and I was praying about the service, and I looked these readings up in Miscellany, and they were given by Mrs. Eddy at the address at the annual meeting in June 6, 1899. And I began to work with those thoughts specifically that were from that article in praying for our world right now. The thoughts were so powerful. Mrs. Eddy also goes on to say, divine love will also rebuke and destroy disease and destroy the belief of life and matter. It will waken the dreamer, the sinner dreaming of pleasure and sin, the sick dreaming of suffering matter, the slothful satisfied to sleep and dream. Divine love is our only physician and never loses a case. Now, isn't that most perfect for what's going on right now? Divine love is going to awaken this dreamful sense of this, as I call it, the nameless nothing. Awaken us, awaken everyone to the truth. And the truth is that God is our only physician, and he never loses a case. So after praying in that way, it came strongly that I should go to a book I hadn't looked at for a while called The Christian Healer. And I turned directly to page 193, and I feel it was so God-directed, I just wanted to share it with you. Excuse me, it was 199. And I turned to this, and it said, in June 1899, Mrs. Eddy traveled to Boston to address the annual meeting of the Mother Church. It was just what we were given in those readings tonight. That year it was being held in Tremont Temple because of the large numbers of members attending. Mrs. Eddy told her listeners that the special demand of the hour was the fulfillment of divine love in our lives. It goes on to say, the practical effect of divine love was evident in many ways during this meeting. Take, for example, the transformation of a woman who had no affection for Mrs. Eddy. Another woman in the audience later wrote of this experience. Quote, a friend who had persistently clung to an unreasonable dislike for Mrs. Eddy told me that as Mrs. Eddy was coming down the aisle, she turned and looked into her face, and the resistance melted away completely. Her eyes filled with tears, and after that, she was absolutely loyal to our leader. End quote. And as was usual, when Mrs. Eddy spoke publicly, healings occurred, and one of these was published in the Christian Science Sentinel. Quote, I awoke on the morning of that day with a sense of suffering so severe that it was a great effort to get up. I could eat no breakfast, and after working, praying an hour, was relieved, but by no means free. Ordinarily, I should have thought it was part of wisdom to remain quiet, but so great was the desire to be present at the meeting and hear our leader that I arose, dressed, and went to the temple, feeling that I should hear the needed word of healing and strength from her lips. nor was I disappointed. While Mrs. Eddy was speaking, the pain lessened, and then I forgot it completely until later during the services. I realized that all sense of discord had vanished. Not only this, but for many months afterwards, I was better and stronger, did better healing work for my patients, and experienced an unusual degree of spiritual and mental freedom. End quote. So I was so grateful for this. I felt like we had a visit with our leader, and her